Alright, so this image here has two different techniques involved. One of them is the wet paint on dry paper that we've just been doing for all of that, for these areas where the color was very specifically put into one spot. But it also shows wet on wet, which is this background, which see how soft, ignore the spots came in at the end, but other than those spots that were on the end, the background of this is very soft and pale and just gives a hint that there are flowers in the background of this scene. And that is done with wet on wet, which means that I painted this first with water, so it's wet, and then I just dropped in color so that it flowed out and became soft and fuzzy in this area that I dropped the water into. So that's how you create these kinds of soft, fuzzy background types of effects, is by wetting the paper first and then adding in some color so that the color spreads and softens and becomes very light. So to do that image, we're going to end up doing a wet on wet for this section, and then these areas which we're going to leave dry, we're going to do wet on dry so that the paint stays right where it is and stays nice and bright and thick. Alright, so step one is to sketch it. We are going to do this quick so that we can get through this in the time that we have left. So this will be a quick rough sketch rather than too detailed and precise a sketch. Alright, so we got curving tulip this way. Get the tulip head. Tulip head. Alright, that's my eraser. Tulip head. Alright. Tulip number 2. Tulip head. Give them the little zip of the layers of the tulip. Alright, now we got the leaf. Alright, top of the leaf has serrations in it. And then there's strings. Okay. Then we have mousy. Mousy with a smile. Alright, so you get the general idea. So again, I'm just doing this one quick and easy so that you can see the wet on wet technique. So we got a mousey in with the tulips. So I draw it first in pencil so that I can make any corrections I want. And actually, as I'm looking at this, no, sweetie, you have to stay over there now. The rope doesn't look quite tight enough to actually be supporting sweetie. Stay over there, please. No, I said stay over there, please. Come on, just stay over here. I do not want you in with the painting. So, I want the rope to look tight. And this rope as well looked a little too swoopy to be holding up. Has to be fairly tight. Yes, you're a very good kitty, but I don't want you over in this area right now, sweetie. I know, you want to chew things. You have plenty of food to go eat. Go chew some food. Is it not as much fun as chewing whatever I am holding at the moment? Are you going to get this out of your system if you chew on this for a minute? Alright, come on, back to the mouse pad. Alright. So with our waterproof pen, sweetie, you're just becoming fairly aggressive over here. With our waterproof pen, we're going to draw in the shapes. Get the cat to stay over there. And the reason we're using a waterproof pen is that we're about to paint over this with water, and if it was not waterproof, then it would be likely to run. So you don't need to use the brand I'm using, but you do need to use something that's waterproof if your intention is to then watercolor over it. Alright, so we're drawing in the tulips, which are the supports for the hammock. And the petals. Tulip number 2. The other support for the hammock. Petal motion, and then the leaf. I'm going to give this a bit more of a bow than I originally drew, because I like it having a little bit of sag to it. A little leaf stem part, little jaggy bits. Now you notice I'm not exactly following the pencil. I'm using it as a guideline. The pencil is there to give you an idea of what to do, but as you're drawing your final pen version, then you can make the adjustments that fit with what you're after, because pencil can be erased. Alright, string tied over there. There. It's tied on the back. And we got the mousey. So the mousey has a round head, round ears, round body, legs, and a swoopy tail, little hand, little eyes, nose, mouth. Alright, and then we'll put in a couple little flower things down here. So we've got the basic idea done with the pen and ink. So again, pen should be waterproof. I use a Jelly Roll Sakura 06, but that part doesn't matter. What matters is that it's waterproof. Pen dries quickly, but it does not dry instantly, so at least give it a short while to be able to dry before you start erasing out over it, so that you don't smear the pen during the erasing step. So I will start by erasing the pencil marks from the area I first did pen on, which are the two standing tulips. And while I'm doing this, I'm giving the middle part a little further chance to dry. And again, it's quite fine to have pencil marks on your watercolor, so you don't have to erase out the pencil marks. I just happen to like to do that. And again, I use an external eraser because the erasers that are found on most pencils are awful, and these things are cheap, so it's good to get a functional eraser and spend the few pennies to do that. Alright, hopefully this part is dry now so that I can erase out the pencil without smearing the pen. Alright, and so far it looks like it is doing alright. Oh, I didn't tie the string on that one. Alright, so the pen is not smearing, the pen is nice and dry. Alright, so the one thing I didn't draw with the ink is the little tie spot there. Alright, so that's the pen and ink part of the drawing. And now we are ready to work on the watercolor. Put that stuff over to the side. So we're back to the smaller brush. Well, no, let's do the bigger brush. Alright, so what we're going to do here is wet on wet. So this is when you make the watercolor paper wet with water, and then you drop color into it so that the color blossoms out and gets lighter as it diffuses into the water that's already on the paper. And that creates this soft effect for the back of the grasses here. So let's see where I can put that, where that stays in. Pull this down. And you can see that even with all that we've been doing, the sky for the mouse over there is still drying. And you can also see that it's getting lighter as it dries. So it's, you know, there's spots in there that are, you could call gray rather than black. So if we wanted to, we could go back over it with more black to make it even blacker black, but I think it's good enough for what my purpose is there. Alright, so let's focus on this one. So we are going to get the brush wet. There's no paint on this brush, it is just wet. And we are going to go in here and paint just water on this image. And we are not going to paint in the stalk and other things where we don't want this soft fuzzy stuff to go. So we're just painting the background wet. Now part of the challenge of this is that, as we've said, things dry pretty quickly. And there are parts of that background there, the black background, that are dry now. There are other parts that are wet. So what we're trying to do here is do wet on wet, and it doesn't help us if this wet dries, because then we're back to wet on dry. So I'm going to do this in sections and just draw an arbitrary section above the top of that tulip so that I can get this area over here done before it all dries off too much. So I've gotten this area pretty wet. I'm going to go in here to a light green, just do this one here, and draw some streaky things in there. Because this area is wet, those streaky things are going to spread and diffuse. And we're just trying to give the sense that there's more grasses back there. Alright, so we used one shade of green. We're going to use this other shade of green. Down here in the lower areas. The thicker grasses. But I'm not going in the area of the stalk, and this stuff I'm doing over here won't merge into the area of the stalk because that's dry. It won't merge into somewhere that's dry. It will only merge into areas that are currently wet. Put a little bit of this green down in the very bottom. Alright, we want the sense of a tulip up there. So we'll put, and see how that's moving and spreading? So it's going to spread anywhere that it finds water. And we'll use some of these yellow. So while I'm making it into a shape, it's not going to stay in that precise shape because the whole thing is wet. It's going to diffuse out. And also you can see how the red is rolling. It's going to roll downhill, and because this paper is not exactly flat, downhill means it's following the curve of the paper down into there. So on one hand that doesn't really matter, on the other hand I'm just going to suck it up a little bit so it doesn't turn too much into a stripey thing. And again, to suck it up I make the brush dry. I'm just squishing it out with my fingers because I don't care if my fingers get wet, and then it acts sort of like a vacuum to vacuum up the color. Alright, so I'm going to add a little bit more of this nice bright green. And you still get a sense of the shape, so I'm making vertical stripes to give the sense of stalks. I'm not doing, it's just doing a squiggly kind of shape. So you get some sense of the verticalness of it, you get some sense of the colors, but as we've said, watercolor dries light. So this is all going to lighten out as it dries and it will just become a soft background. Alright, so while that side dries, and here I'll put a few little greens up here so it's not completely white up there. Alright, so while that side dries, I'm going to get my brush completely clean so it's just water. Now I'm going to work on this side over here on what is my left. So on this side over here, again I'm just wetting it completely with water. Now normally I would flip this paper around because it would be easier for me to get to this curve with my hand pointed the other way, but to make it easier for you guys I'll just do it from that side. And again I'll stop at the top of this tulip so that I just work on a section at a time so that this side stays nice and wet while I try to do my activities over here because it's already starting to dry. Just shows how dry it is in my house today. Alright, so I got it wet. Grab some light green, make some vertical slashes in here to represent leaves and stalks of things. Get a bit darker green to add a little bit of texture in here. Put the darker stuff a little lower down. Some of the darker green. A little more little things. Just so we've got different kinds of greens going on. And up at the top, grab some yellow. Make a little splotch for a yellow tulip. Grab some red. Make a little splotch for a red tulip. But see how it's just sort of growing and blending and it's heading downhill? That's what it does. So if you want to make this super straight, then you could flatten it out beforehand. I'm just working with a sketch pad, so it's going to have curls and tendrils, and also as it gets wet it's going to buckle a little. So you're just making a general impression in the back, but if you want to keep them separate, then I pull the water out of the brush so it's dry, and then I suck up this color that's escaping to try to keep it sort of in the area I want it to be in. But it's gonna, I mean, the whole point of wet on wet is it's gonna do what it's going to do, and you just sort of find a piece at that. And orange, let's put this orange in here. Alright, got an orange shape. And see, that red and yellow is making an orange over there. That's alright. We'll try to get some yellow and add some yellow back and over here to make this more of a yellow shape. But it's going to do what it's going to do. Alright. So now I'm going to tackle this middle part under this leaf. Again, I'm rinsing off my brush, making it completely clear. So this is just water. I'm putting in just water down here. Clear water. Because this is a wet on wet technique. So I'm painting clear water down in the bottom area. And I am only putting the water in the background area. So I'm not going to put the water on the stem or on this hammock leaf or anything else down there. I'm not too worried about those little flower things because the color on the flower things will be nice and dark and will sit on top. But I don't want it in the stems, and I don't want it on the little mouse leaf. Alright, so I got all that area wet, and there's little hairs in there. My cat hairs get everywhere, so you can just lift those out with the brush. Alright, so now we get some of our green. Put in some green stripes. Get in some of the darker green. Put it in there. And again, because we're painting on a wet surface, everything is just going to spread, which is fine. We're just trying to give the impression that there is green stuff in the background. So it's all going to spread and merge. And that is okay. That's what we're after. A little more of this lighter green. And even though it's all going to spread and merge, I'm still using mostly vertical shapes to give that sense of grass growing behind it. Alright, so the bottom quadrant is done. I am getting the brush clean and making it nice and clear again. So now we're just painting with the clear water. This will be the trickiest part to paint with the clear water because now we're trying to do all these little edges around the mousy and the little rippled leaves. I'll go around the tulips. So we're only doing the background. Doing the background with clear water. Alright. So we've got the background painted with clear water in preparation for adding the gentle background. So we'll start with the bright greens. And see how they diffuse out and become a soft, fuzzy set of shapes. And a few little darker ones. Maybe just a few of these crossing across. A few lighter ones up here. Alright, so general idea is just to make a background that gives the sense that this is in the middle of a garden area. But you see how it makes a soft fuzzy effect because you painted that color into the water and it gave the paint a chance to diffuse and spread out. So then the next step for this would be to paint the object colors, which we want to be darker and in a specific area, and with everything else wet around it, you generally want to wait a few minutes so that the wet stuff all dries, so that your new stuff that you're painting doesn't diffuse out into the background, because that will lose the effect that we're after. So now I'm looking at this to see what could be dry. Alright, we'll just give that a few minutes. So, back to the other one that we're finishing up, now that we have a half hour left. So switching over to that gave the background a chance to dry, and just as a reminder, that's what we're aiming for this one, with a soft background and then solid colors for the foreground for it. So we drew this in pencil, we traced over with ink, and then I erased out the pencil just because I didn't want the pencil marks, and then we wet the background with water and painted on some soft swoopy things. And you can see I added a few stripes here at the end, and the paper was already drying at that point, so these ones that I added on ended up being more solid than these other ones, which had a softer feel to them. So that's how quickly it can dry. There's still some wet spots up in there, but that should be okay if we work down in the areas down here, as long as I'm very careful when I get up there, because otherwise the colors could run in together. So let us put that there, and we'll work with, I think, the littler brush. Right, and this water is getting a little, because we just worked with this white, a little less than clear, but it should still be good enough to finish up our stuff that we're working on. Alright, so we're going to work with probably that green. Which green is that? No, that's a little too blue of a green. How about that green? Yeah, alright, so we'll work with this green for the stems. So again, the stem area is dry. So we are painting wet paint on dry, and it should stay right where we want it. And see, it's not moving or anything, it's staying still because the paper beneath it is dry and is not causing any of that kind of spreading effect that we saw before. Now we want the focal items to be dark against that light background. The eye is drawn to dark darks and to white whites. So in order to get this stem to stand out from the sea of green that it's up against, I want to make this fairly dark. If you had expensive watercolor paints, you can get it to start out dark right from the start because of how much pigment they have in there. Because I use fairly inexpensive watercolor paints, I put on a couple layers to it, and by adding a couple layers that helps it get darker and darker and more saturated. Alright, so that's at least the first pass on the stem. We got these and the other stem. So these are a pair of tulip stems that are holding up the leaf. So it's good to have a variety of colors in your image to give some visual interest to the image, but it's also good to have those colors work well together. There's some colors that tend to clash, and there's some colors that tend to complement each other. And there are all sorts of online tools where you can put in one color and it will tell you which other colors work well with it. So while you're getting started, you can certainly use those tools and get a sense of which colors work well together. And then the more that you paint, the more that it just sort of becomes second nature to you which colors that you like to work together with. So while it might seem fun to put a cacophony of colors in something, then you end up with colors that don't work well with each other, and it can impede the interest of the image. So it's just something to think about. You know, you're the artist, and in the end, whatever you decide works well for you is what you go with. But it's good to think about the impact your image will have on viewers, and if you can make the image have colors that work well together, that can make the image even more impactful on the people who are looking at it. And then, just like we said before, something to think about is the direction of the light. So if the light's coming from this direction, then this side will be lighter, and then the side on the opposite side will be darker because it's in the shadows. So if you put darker color on that shadowed side, that brings it to life more. And again, depending on the style that you're going for. I am clearly not going for a realistic style with this. I'm going for a cartoony, stylized style. So I'm not trying to make these look super realistic, but it's still good to have some of those kinds of things like light and shadow to bring it to life a little. Alright, so we got stems. And you'll notice it's not the same color as what I used in that other one. I like to mix things up a little. And this again is how, you know, even if you are painting sort of the same image, it's going to come out different depending what colors you choose, depending on your mood on the day, all that kind of stuff. Alright, so now we want the green for the hammock. Sort of looking at this. I think that's, again, too blue for what I'm wanting. See, and I talk about what I'm wanting. The way that I feel at the moment, it impacts the kinds of colors I want to paint with. Yeah, I like that one. So the mood that one is feeling can greatly influence the way the art gets painted, even in terms of how rough the strokes are, or how gentle the strokes are, how dark the colors are, all sorts of things. Alright, trying to do this quickly so this won't come out as detailed as other ones might, because it is 12:34 and I have until 1, and then from 1 to 3 Laura Senadella does amazing oil paintings from her studio for free. So the link to that will be on the Blackstone Valley Art Association page, or if you're on Facebook you can go, well, I mean, you're probably on Facebook if you're watching this live, since this is on Facebook Live. You can search for Laura O. Senadella, that's Cenedella, and she has a Facebook page, and you'll see links to her previous videos, and then she will have a link there when she starts today's video. And you can watch her live, you can ask her questions while she paints. She is an amazing person to watch. And you don't have to paint what she's painting, you can learn techniques from her and paint your own thing. You can just hang out and chat with us. It is a great group of people. Alright, so once again the bottom would be shadowed. The bottom wouldn't get as much light. And watercolor paint always dries lighter. So you want to make it darker than you want it to be, with the assumption that when it dries it will still be lighter. And you'll note that I'm painting in the direction that I think the colors on the objects would be. So I'm painting this one horizontally where I was painting the other stripes vertically, because you do still see a sense of the brush strokes in here even when it dries, and that adds to the type of texture of the object that you're painting. So because this is a leaf, I'm putting in all those little striations, but right now this is the shadow of the bottom of it. And I'm dabbing at it, but that's all going to spread in the wetness of the paint there and become more of an even texture. So we've got a leaf. I'll fix the little stem part there. Got a leaf, we got stems. I'll add a little bit of darkness on the shadow side of the stems, since I've got paint on my brush anyway. Alright, and while I'm here, this all seems to be dry down in here now, so I'll add a little green on these stems for the littler flowers. Alright, I think all the green stuff is done. Let's tackle the yellow of the right hand flower. So we just get some yellow, paint in here. So I'm going to start by painting everything the same shade of yellow, just to give a base layer. Alright, and then I want the overlapping petal area to be a little darker. Now everything is wet and yellow right now, so this is going to run a little. But because I painted this fairly lightly, it will not run too much. There isn't too much water there to suck it over. And I don't want it to be too sharp-edged because this is a natural flower. And, you know, natural flowers are not rigid in general. They have a softness to them. So I will let that dry. Do the other side in red. Now let's use this red. Normally I would turn the paper a little to make this easier on me, but I have to paint around this tripod anyway. So I will just do the best I can from this odd angle. Oh, this part will be hard. That's alright. There we go. So that's the first red layer. And then we want this part here to be a little darker. Again, this part, since I just made all of this wet, is going to spread a little. But that's okay because I'm just aiming for a general feel of red. I'm not too concerned about the parts being exactly where I put them. Alright, so now we've got a red flower and a yellow flower. We've got these little spots of color down here for these little flowers. And this red is nice and dark enough that it is going right on top of that green background that we had in there. Mary says, thank you for explaining to where to work with wet paper. Yes, with wet paper, you have to accept the paint will flow where it wants to flow in the water. So you have water in a general area, add paint into a general area, and let it blossom. So yes, wet and wet is about creating a general impression. You can't really control where things are going to go. You can put a yellow splotch there and a red splotch there, but you're not making specific shapes when you're doing wet and wet. You're just creating general splotchy things. And like I said, if the splotchy thing starts going somewhere where you really don't want it for some reason, you can use paper towels or a dry brush or something to try to sop it up a little, but it's still going to just keep going where it wants to go. Like this cat of mine, who's decided that she wants to come back here and be a part of it. Sweetie pie, I love you very much. In just a few minutes and then you can climb all over here. But you can't climb in the wet paint, okay? Okay. Oh, see, I say that and then she immediately starts trying to come forward because she wants to come walk in the wet paint. You are a good kitty. You do not understand the nature of watercolors. So I don't know if you can see her head, but she is right here, peering with her little nose as close as she can get to the watercolor paints. Alright, sweetie? You gonna stay there? You're a good kitty. You are a loved kitty. Alright, so now I have the challenge of a cat laying on my left arm as a pillow right next to the watercolors while I'm going to try to paint the watercolors with my right arm. See, we have to add, just, no. Sweetie. Here, alright, you can chew on that for a second. Alright, you done chewing? Alright, yes, chew. But kitty, I'm running out of time, so you can't chew for much longer. You're a good kitty. You're a very good kitty. Alright. Hopefully kitty is done chewing now, so I can get the mouse done. Alright, oh, did I like turn the whole thing around? I did. Alright, well that's alright. The gray is here. Gray for the mouse. I have to be careful about only resting my hand on sections that are actually dry. Trying to paint little mousy parts without painting the other parts. Alright. So again, this could cause problems if this green leaf were still wet, because the wetness of the green leaf would touch the wetness of the new gray and they would merge into each other. And while that is nice for the wet on wet soft background, it's not nice to have green streaks running through our mouse. Kitty! Oh, kitty's stepping on the keyboard. It's always an adventure in kitty world. Alright, we are back. Alright, so what else does mouse need? I like mices to have pink ears. So we will just pick up a little bit of pink, which is right here anyway. Sweetie, we're nearly done. Stay over there. Now that gray isn't quite dry. Alright, yeah, I should probably wait a second rather than just putting into that. Because if I try to put the pink into the ears right now, it's going to spread out and his whole face is going to turn pink. And now my cat is chewing on my brush end. Alright, let's take a little yellow while we've got a moment and add another layer of yellow here. Give that a bit brighter color. Alright, a bit brighter for the yellow. For the red. Alright. We got the red. Alright, the mouse is set. As set as can be. So now what remains is once again the spatter. So in this case, I didn't go with white spatter because we didn't want stars. I wanted just a little orange and red and yellow spatter to give that sense of a happy late spring, summer kind of afternoon. And, you know, the spatter doesn't really represent anything. It's not like there are billions of little red bugs flying around, hopefully, or anything like that. It just gives it sort of a playful feel to it. Gives it more of an impressionistic feel. So everything is pretty dry at this point. So I will clean off my brush. Once again, I will move everything out of the splatter zone so that I don't get everything all covered with colors. Just trying to find safe places to put everything. Sweetie. Yes, you're a good sweetie. You're a good sweetie. Alright. So, since we are taking the colors out of the paint box this time, alright, yeah, you... No, I said you could come over. You can't step on the wet paint. I know you don't understand. You don't understand what's going on and why you can't step on some things. Come on, sweetie. Come over to the mouse pad. Alright, we're going to use this brush here to spatter again. The cat is completely convinced that she wants to come over and be a part of this. Sweetie. Here, you can take a couple of chews on the end of the brush. Now you have to go this way. There we go. Alright, we're going to do a couple of spatters with yellow, a couple of spatters of orange, and a couple of spatters of red. So we'll start with the yellow. Just get some yellow spots on the end of this. We're going to close this up so we don't get yellow on all the other paint things. Right, yellow, as you can see, doesn't show up very well because it's so light. So that's more just for a little hint of color. So don't expect the yellow unless you're, I don't know, working with a very dark yellow or something like that. Don't expect the yellow to do much that's visible, but it's still, I like to do it still because it adds a little bit of hint of spots. Right, so even though I've done yellow on there, you probably won't even really be able to see it. If you look close at it in person, you can't see it. And my finger is a little yellow. Alright, yellow done. And if I was actually working on a painting at this point, I would probably get fresh water, but since I'm just doing some spattering at the end, I'm not too worried about it. Alright, orange. I'll do this bright orange. Zuzu is staring at the end of the brush as if she wants to come eat it. Zuzu, I'm almost done. And then I will let you eat the brush. Right, so now we're working with orange. I'll have to close this up. Alright, so you can see the orange a little better. Still, the aim is not to have gigantic splotches everywhere. It's just to give a general sense of the color and a little sense of playfulness. Alright, get some more orange on here. Again, the aim is not to make it too wet because then the color will be pretty see-through and invisible, but you need to have it wet enough that it actually splatters. Alright. So you can see some of the splatters there. Alright, so orange. Rinse off the brush. Of the three of these, the red is the darkest color. We'll go with this red. Alright. Alright, so the red shows up best in terms of showing up against the background, but it's good to have the little bits of orange and the little bits of yellow in there just to add a little bit of variety to the colors that you're doing. And get that thoroughly rinsed out. Fairly dry. Get most of the color off my fingers. Let me scroll down a little. There we go. Alright, so where'd the other one go that I just did? So we have the mouse, and the mouse in the moon, and the mouse on the hammock. So a bunch of different techniques explored here in these two different images. This one was done all on dry paper with wet brushes. This one, with the background, was done on wet paper, wetting the paper with water. And then the closer details were done with dry paper, using the wet brushes on dry paper. So ask if you have any questions about how any of this works. I use very inexpensive watercolor paper, watercolor paints, and watercolor brushes, so you can get started with this without spending very much money at all. And even the pen's inexpensive. Any waterproof pen will work fine if you want to do it with the pen and ink style that I'm doing here. And if you want to try more expensive papers and paints to see how they work, you can certainly do that too, and see what kinds of colors you get out of that. But the key is just to practice and play with things, see how the different techniques work. And I suppose I'll add a little pink to the mouse's ears while I'm thinking about it. And you know, I keep going back and forth on this whole whiskers thing. I keep saying at the end, oh, I didn't add whiskers and I should, and then I add whiskers and I don't like the way it looks. So maybe I just have whiskerless mouses, or maybe they have such tiny whiskers that they can't be seen. But he should have pink ears. There we go. He's got the little pink circles of the ears. And you see I just grabbed some from the edge here, so you don't even have to use the paints in your pins. If you have some over here that you were mixing colors out of, that all is perfectly usable and can be just right for something that you were trying to do. So ask with any questions about any of this. You can find me at Lisa Shea on Facebook, Twitter, pretty much everywhere else. Or I'm the president of the Blackstone Valley Art Association, so if you contact the BVAA, so we're at bvaa.org, we're at BVAA on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and bunches of other places. So wherever you want to contact us, we are happy to help you answer questions, and we do all sorts of shows and workshops and other fun things.